begin a story that unfolds slowly, like a mist settling over a quiet path in the woods. It's a story about losing direction, about searching for something you can't quite name, and how sometimes the light you need the most only reveals itself when everything else disappears. You've had days like this, haven't you? When the noise softens but the silence is louder, when you don't know where you're going anymore, or even if you're meant to be going somewhere at all. Here's a gentle reminder. You will never be able to control the world, but you can learn to govern your own mind. And that is where everything begins. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are, and where in the world are you listening from? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself walking slowly on a path that feels both familiar and strange. The sky is a soft navy, the trees like quiet sentinels. There's no destination, no deadline, just the sound of your breath and the crunch of gravel beneath your feet. You're not sure when the road began. Maybe it was the day you gave up trying to keep up. Or maybe it was when something ended, an idea, a job, a version of yourself. Either way, the road behind you has faded, not erased, just distant, like something that happened to someone else. And that's what brings you here into the vastness of not knowing. You glance over your shoulder. There's no one following. That used to frighten you. Now it's almost a relief. The Stoics spoke often of this place, the place between identities, when you're no longer who you were and not yet who you'll become. Marcus Aurelius wrote during nights of pain and exhaustion, journaling under a flickering oil lamp while disease claimed the men around him. Even an emperor understood. The outer world may be chaos, but the inner world can still remain intact. That's your challenge tonight, not to solve anything, but to stay with yourself as the dust settles. Because what is lost isn't always gone. Sometimes it's just quiet. You think back to how tightly you once clung to control. You had routines, plans, a vision board even. But the more tightly you grasped, the more the world resisted. As if the very act of control invited life to slip through your fingers like water. And now, no map, no markers, just this moment and the next step. There's a paradox here. When you had everything planned, you felt anxious. Now that you have no direction, you feel something unexpected, a strange, flickering peace, like sitting beside a fire that you didn't light, but that still keeps you warm. The human mind despises ambiguity, but the soul, it thrives in it. And yet even now, doubt sneaks in. You wonder if you should turn back, if this aimlessness is failure, but deep down you sense that something is shifting slowly beneath the surface. The Buddhists call it beginner's mind. The Stoics didn't use that phrase, but their idea was the same. Approach each moment with no demand, no entitlement. Let reality show you what it is instead of projecting what you want it to be. You look up, the sky has no answers, it simply is. Still, something calls you forward, not ambition, not urgency, but something softer, curiosity, a quiet willingness to see what comes next. A breeze brushes your face, cool but not cold. A reminder that the world continues even when you pause, that you're allowed to pause. Here's the truth, whispered gently. You do not have to know where you are going. In fact, you never really did. The idea of direction was always a guess, a story you told yourself to feel safe. But now that the story has paused, you can hear things you'd forgotten. The rustle of leaves, the tempo of your own breath, the quiet space between thoughts. That's where your lantern begins to flicker, not from solving or pushing or proving, but from stopping. You realize, maybe for the first time in a long while, that you are not lost. You are simply between places. And in this betweenness, there's room to breathe, to let go of names, titles, and roles, to be nobody in particular, just a human being breathing, walking, noticing. Freedom doesn't always come wrapped in clarity. Sometimes it looks like an open road at dusk with no signposts at all. But isn't that when the stars appear? The trail grows thinner as you walk, the gravel becoming patches of soft earth. Your steps grow quieter, your thoughts more spacious. There's a kind of weightlessness here, not the joy of escape, but the simplicity of not needing to arrive. You reach into your coat pocket, instinctively searching for something, a guide, a compass, a sign. But there's nothing, only your own hand. You pause, unsettled. It's strange how the absence of direction can feel like danger, as if not knowing is failure, as if every moment must be aimed, useful, measured. You feel that itch, the need to fix the uncertainty, to define it, to escape it. But tonight you don't. Tonight you let it be. The Stoics taught that we suffer most not from the events themselves, but from our interpretations of them. Epictetus reminded his students that the external world may unfold unpredictably, but our opinions, our judgments, those are ours to govern. So you take a breath, and then another. What if this moment is not confusion but clarity? What if not knowing is exactly where you're meant to be? A crow calls out from a branch above. The sound cuts across your thinking, sharp and unapologetic. A presence that demands nothing from you, just a reminder that you are not alone. You smile, not because things are easy, but because for once you're not trying to bend them to your will. There's a story about the Stoic general Agricola, father-in-law to Tacitus, who was exiled by the Emperor Domitian. Stripped of power, he was sent far from Rome. Many considered it a humiliation, but Agricola accepted it with calm. He did not resist. He did not demand to return. Instead, he lived quietly, reflecting, planting seeds in his garden. That's the lesson tonight. When the compass is gone, you stop asking where you are and begin asking who you are in this place. A paradox again. You feel more grounded without the compass than you ever did with it. Because what was it pointing toward anyway? Approval, achievement, control. You start to remember all the ways you once measured your worth, titles, routines, goals, and how quickly those measures turned into chains. What's left now is you, bare, unadorned, you without a plan. And somehow this version of you feels more true than the one with everything scheduled. You don't run from this realization. You sit with it, like a lantern warming in your hands even though you haven't lit it yet. There's another question waiting beneath the silence. If you never find your way back, would that be so bad? The answer isn't immediate, but you feel the tension begin to melt, not into certainty, but into peace. And here, in this in-between, you notice something else. The temptation to panic begins to lose its grip. The need to label your state as lost softens into something more neutral, more honest. You're not lost. You're in a clearing, a still point between doing and becoming. You step forward, not because you know the way, but because movement is part of being alive. There's no rush, no striving, just the rhythm of your body remembering what it means to trust the ground beneath you. The Stoics often reminded themselves, nature never hurries, yet all is accomplished. They believed in aligning with nature, not as a concept, but as an act of humility. Letting go of illusion, accepting the flow, you try it, just for a few minutes. You stop trying to make this a story. You let it be what it is. The trees, the silence, your breath. And in doing so, you notice something return. A subtle sense of direction, not in the external world, but inside. It isn't a path. It's a posture. Your shoulders relax. Your jaw softens. You let go of needing to be anywhere other than here. The paradox arrives again. The moment you release your grip on knowing, the world feels less chaotic. Not because it has changed, but because you have. Some philosophers still debate this. Is there truly such a thing as inner certainty? Or are we simply telling stories to comfort ourselves in the dark? It's a fair question. But tonight, in this darkness, you don't need an answer. You just need the question to be allowed to exist without judgment. You're walking again. The ground feels steadier. The moon rises slowly to your left. You notice your shadow stretching across the path. Even in uncertainty, you still cast a shape. That thought comforts you. You realize the compass was never in your pocket. It was in your willingness to move forward without it. And that, too, is control, not over the world, but over your reactions to it. You reach a bend in the road. The trees part slightly. The path continues, quiet and unmarked. You take one more breath and step forward. The fog rolls in slowly, not a warning, not a threat, just a soft curtain drawn over the familiar. Shapes blur, shadows stretch and melt. The path is still beneath your feet, but the world beyond your immediate steps disappears. You pause. Fog is unsettling to the part of you that craves certainty. It removes clarity without your permission. It makes you feel like you've lost something, even if everything is exactly where it was. And so, a quiet anxiety begins to rise. Not loud, but persistent, like a question that won't be answered. That's when you begin to hear it. The echo. At first it's faint, just the sound of your own thoughts bouncing off the mist. But slowly it picks up old voices, old expectations. You recognize them, not as memories, but as ghosts of standards you never agreed to. Be successful. Be admired, be faster, be more. It's strange how these voices return when you're most alone. They dress up as motivation but carry the weight of judgment. They don't ask what matters to you, they just push. Expectation is tricky. It can look like a compass, feel like purpose. But often, it's a cage disguised as guidance. You remember when you mistook someone else's dream for your own, when meeting a deadline felt like fulfilling a destiny, only to find that it hollowed you out. The Stoics warned about this. Seneca, in his letters, wrote about how the crowd's noise could drown out the inner voice. He encouraged stepping back, not from people, but from their projections. Only in silence could one hear the truth. So here you are, in literal fog and inner haze, trying to separate what is yours from what was given to you without consent. You stop walking just to listen. The echoes grow louder the more you resist. That's their trick. They thrive on your struggle, so instead you do something unexpected. You let them speak, and then you gently ask, "Is this mine?" Some of them dissolve on contact, like mist touched by sunlight. Others cling a bit longer. Family expectations, career ambitions that were never quite yours. But with each breath, you feel a little more distance, a little more clarity. You begin to see how much of your mental weight came not from failure, but from fighting to meet standards that never fit you. There's a memory that surfaces now, something small but sharp. A time you made a choice that felt wrong to others but right to you. Maybe you left a job, ended a relationship, turned down an opportunity. People questioned you. Some were disappointed, but deep down you knew, and you still know. That moment is a lantern, a glimpse of what it means to live from your own center. The fog isn't gone, but it feels less ominous now. It becomes a metaphor, not for being lost, but for learning how to walk without over-reliance on sight. Here's the paradox. Expectations promise safety, but they often rob you of freedom. And yet, letting them go can feel like stepping into danger. So which risk is greater? That's the open question philosophers have debated forever. How much of your identity is chosen and how much inherited? And what happens when you stop performing and just are? You walk again. This time slower. Not in hesitation, but in care. The fog quiets things, and in that quiet your own voice returns. Not loud, not commanding, but present. You speak to yourself not aloud, but inwardly. I don't need to be what I'm not. I don't owe my life to approval. I can release the roles I never chose. With each thought, something loosens in your chest, not completely, but enough to breathe deeper. You think of Musonius Rufus, often called the Roman Socrates. He taught that philosophy wasn't about words but about action. That a good life wasn't something you argued, it was something you lived. Quietly, honestly, one choice at a time. You imagine him now walking beside you in the mist. He doesn't give you advice. He doesn't hand you a map. He simply nods as if to say, "You already know." And perhaps you do. There's a softness to the air now. A grace that comes not from answers, but from the gentle acceptance of not needing them. A bird calls out in the distance, one note then another. Not a melody, just presence. You find yourself smiling, not because you've figured things out, but because you no longer have to. You're allowed to walk in the fog. You're allowed to release the weight of invisible expectations. And maybe, just maybe, the road ahead is not about becoming someone else. Maybe it's about becoming no one in particular, just yourself, unarmored, undirected, alive. You come to a tree leaning gently over the path, a crooked old branch reaching across your way like a weathered arm. Its bark is split, its form gnarled by years of wind and sun. But it still stands, still grows, still holds out its limbs as if to ask, "What are you carrying that you no longer need?" You pause beneath it, placing your palm against the cool, rough surface. There's a calm in this contact, like touching something that's endured more than you, and learned to bend rather than break. You felt that kind of pressure before. The kind that pushes into your chest, demands a reaction. That emotion rising suddenly, anger, anxiety, fear, like heat beneath your ribs. There was a moment not long ago when someone crossed a line, said something cruel, treated you unfairly. You remember how your body responded first, the flush in your cheeks, the tightness in your jaw, that surge begging for release. But you didn't explode. You didn't lash out. Instead, you held it. Not suppressing it, but containing it, like a lantern holding fire instead of letting it burn down the room. That was your strength, even if no one saw it, especially because no one saw it. In that moment, you practiced one of the hardest Stoic virtues, temperance. The world often praises the loud reaction, the clapback, the quick defense. But the Stoics knew that true power lies in restraint, not out of fear but out of clarity. Marcus Aurelius, often provoked by critics and conspirators, rarely responded in kind. He wrote instead, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." He didn't mean it bitterly. He meant it literally. Do not become what wounds you. You reflect on how much energy is spent defending the ego. How often we argue not because it helps, but because we don't want to feel small. And how that very resistance to feeling small often makes us feel smaller. But when you responded with stillness, not submission but presence, you broke the cycle. You became the branch that did not snap under pressure. And something softened in that moment. It didn't mean the other person changed. It didn't mean justice arrived. But you weren't trapped. You had a choice, and you made it. That memory stays with you now as you move again, the old branch overhead, a quiet monument to what can be endured without losing form. There's a paradox you begin to notice. The more control you have over yourself, the less you need to control others. It seems backward at first, but then you recall moments when you let go of trying to win the argument and found peace instead of victory. Or when you let someone else be wrong without the need to correct them. And how rare that kind of power feels in a world obsessed with being right. The Stoics weren't emotionless. They felt deeply. But they learned to give their feelings structure, not as denial but as discipline. Not to avoid emotion but to ride it like a wave without drowning. You take a slow breath now and notice how your body carries memories. How even old conflicts live in your shoulders, your spine, your stomach. But as you walk, those places begin to release, not because they are resolved, but because you're no longer holding onto the need for resolution. Some would say that's weakness, giving up, letting things go. But the Stoics would argue the opposite. Letting go of vengeance, of reactivity, of the need to always correct and control. That is the work of someone who knows their own depth. You recall a moment in childhood. Maybe it was the first time someone misunderstood you. It stung, didn't it? That first taste of unfairness. But now, years later, you see it with new eyes. Not everything needs correction. Not every injustice needs your energy. You're allowed to choose peace over reaction. You reach the bend in the road. The air is lighter here. The fog is thinning. The branch overhead gently sways, creaking in the breeze. It hasn't broken. It's just adapted. Like you realize that the self-restraint you once saw as weakness is actually a form of inner architecture, a kind of invisible shelter you carry wherever you go. The world may storm around you. People may misjudge you. But inside there's a calm center, a stillness that cannot be taken, only surrendered. And tonight, you choose not to surrender it. Not because you're above others, but because you're beginning to know yourself. The echo of that earlier moment, the one when you chose calm, reverberates in you still. a quiet reminder of what you're capable of. There will be other moments, other tests. You won't always get it right, but now you know you can be the branch. You can bend and still belong to yourself. The air grows warmer as you continue, though the light remains soft and filtered. You notice how the landscape changes without announcement, stones giving way to moss, shadows replaced by dappled light. You're still walking the same road, and yet something has shifted. You remember a time when anger rose in you like a flame. Not just once, many times. Small injustices, slights. People who cut in line, interrupted you, dismissed you. You recall how quickly it sparked, how natural it felt to feed that fire with your words, your indignation, your sharp silence. But tonight, under this softer sky, you see it differently. There was a time you believed anger gave you power, that it was strength, that it meant you still cared, but the Stoics would ask, what kind of power consumes you in order to use you? Anger often enters disguised as a protector. It tells you, they can't treat you this way. And maybe they can't. But what happens when you become the very thing you're defending against? There's a Stoic tale of Cato the younger, fierce defender of Roman republican ideals. His sense of justice burned brightly, but it was not uncontrolled. When provoked, insulted, even threatened, Cato responded not with fury, but with silence or calm explanation. His control was not cold, it was earned, trained, willing. He understood that fire, if uncontained, spreads beyond its target and burns the home it lives in. And tonight, you revisit a time when you nearly let your own fire consume you. You remember the specific words, maybe from a colleague, a partner, even a stranger, that triggered the heat. How it felt justified, righteous even, but the moment passed, and when it did, what was left? The bitterness, the regret, the hollow echo of having said too much or nothing at all. You step lightly now because you carry that memory like a coal, no longer flaming but still warm. A lesson. Anger doesn't always explode. Sometimes it simmers. Sometimes it tightens into sarcasm, coldness, detachment. You think you've controlled it, but really it's just changed form. That's why the Stoics weren't content with appearances. They wanted the inner life to match the outer calm. You breathe slowly now, not because you're suppressing something, but because you've begun to understand that your breath is the bellows, and you choose what to ignite. There's a paradox here again. Anger feels like control in the moment, but almost always leaves you more out of control in its wake. And yet, you're not wrong for feeling it. Emotion itself is not the enemy. The Stoics never told you not to feel. They asked only this: when the wave rises, can you stay rooted? Can you remain the shore, not the sea? You pause beside a stream now thin and steady. Its surface glimmers with golden flecks of light. You kneel. Watch how it flows around obstacles, never resisting, never stopping, just adjusting. What if anger, instead of becoming your identity, became something to observe, not a command but a signal? You recall how, not long ago, someone tried to pull you into their fire. You felt the heat, but instead of joining them, you responded with clarity. Maybe it was just a simple sentence, or a moment of stillness before answering. But it changed everything. They didn't expect calm, and maybe that calm didn't fix the situation, but it protected you. You carry that with you now like a quiet tool. You can choose to not be inflamed, and it doesn't mean weakness. In fact, it's one of the greatest strengths, the refusal to let someone else dictate the state of your inner world. That's a kind of freedom few people ever touch, and it's available in every moment. There's an open question among Stoic scholars. Can all anger be refined into virtue, or are there times when even righteous fury must be let go? Maybe there's no single answer. Maybe, like the stream, the answer adjusts based on what it encounters. But you know this: reactivity never gave you peace. Only presence did. And here, in this soft patch of forest with the stream whispering beside you, peace feels not like an achievement, but like a return, as if it had always been here, waiting for you to notice. The fire still burns in the world. There is injustice. There is cruelty. But you've seen what happens when you carry that fire inward unchecked. Now, instead of feeding the fire, you hold the lantern. A small light, steady, directed, contained. You stand again gently, continue walking, and though the fire once felt powerful, the lantern feels wiser. The ground turns soft beneath your steps, not muddy, just quiet like a forest floor layered with time. Fallen leaves, old twigs, earth that remembers, and with each step you feel something ancient rise, not from the world around you but from within. You're thinking now about the stone, that one. The one you carried for far too long. It wasn't always heavy. At first it felt like protection, a reason, a story. Maybe someone hurt you, maybe they never apologized. Maybe they never saw what you held onto because they never looked back. So you carried it. That anger, that betrayal, that moment of being overlooked, dismissed, forgotten. You didn't carry it in your hands. You carried it in your shoulders, in your sleep, in the quiet thoughts between conversations. And like a stone tucked in your pocket, it shaped the way you walked, tilted, guarded, slower. But here in this stillness you wonder, why are you still holding it? There's a tree ahead with a hollow at its base, wide enough to hold something the size of a small stone. You feel a quiet pull not to place anything there yet, but to sit. So you do, and with the sitting comes the memory, the face, the voice, the sharp word or the silence that wounded you more. The moment you knew you were right and they didn't care. You held the stone like proof. Look what you did. Look how I've carried this because of you. But over time, the person became distant. Maybe they changed. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they disappeared, but the stone remained. And here's the strangest truth. They didn't feel its weight. Only you did. The Stoics warned about this. They taught that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to feel sick. Epictetus reminded his students, it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. You remember brushing off that idea the first time you heard it. So I'm supposed to just let it go, pretend it didn't hurt. But that was never the point. Letting go doesn't mean denial, it means release. It means choosing your own freedom over the comfort of being right. Because being right doesn't always heal you. You feel the stone in your mind now, its weight, its coolness. The part of you that still believes it gives you something, identity maybe, certainty. But what it's mostly given you is fatigue. So here's the paradox. You carried the stone to avoid being hurt again, but carrying it has hurt you every day since. You press your back gently against the tree behind you. Let it hold you for a moment. Its bark is rough but grounding. And slowly you begin to trace the outline of what forgiveness might look like. Not as an act of kindness toward the other person, but as an offering to yourself. Not forgetting, not excusing, but untethering. You picture Marcus Aurelius, hunched over his journal late at night, writing to himself more than to the world. He forgave people not because they deserved it, but because he refused to carry their actions in his heart any longer. You breathe, the world doesn't shift, the sky doesn't open. But something loosens just slightly in your chest. You reach into your memory and pick up the stone, not physically but with presence. And then without ceremony you place it in the hollow at the base of the tree. It stays there, and you don't need to watch it. You just stand, lighter, a little less burdened by the past. Here's a thought to carry with you instead. You are not what was done to you. You are what you choose to become in the aftermath. And forgiveness, it's not always about the other person. It's often just about making room for breath, for softness, for sleep. Some philosophers argue that full forgiveness is only possible with apology. Others believe it can be practiced independently as a way of reclaiming autonomy. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps it depends on the wound. But in this moment, it's not a theory, it's a practice. You begin walking again, barely noticing that your shoulders have relaxed, that your spine feels straighter, that the road ahead seems less heavy, less narrow. You haven't forgotten the story. You've simply stopped carrying its weight. The path opens into a clearing, wide, quiet, bathed in pale silver light. There's no roof above you now. Just the vastness of the sky, scattered with stars, and a single cloud drifting like a thought that forgot where it was going. You stop in the center of the clearing. No walls, no shelter, no frame. You've lost something, haven't you? Not just recently, over the years, bit by bit. a relationship that faded, a version of your future that unraveled, a place you once called home, a dream that no longer fits the shape of your life. And for a long time you told yourself that losing these things left you exposed, unprotected, vulnerable. But tonight, standing under this open sky, you feel something unexpected: peace. There is no roof, but there is no pressure either, no need to perform, no need to guard, just the sensation of being held by space itself. You realize you mistook structure for safety. The Stoics often spoke of externals, things like status, possessions, even the body itself, as indifferent. Not bad, not good, just beyond your full control. Useful, maybe, but not essential to your freedom. Seneca lost his fortune more than once. Exiled, reinstated, stripped of power, and yet he wrote his clearest, most powerful letters in those quiet, diminished seasons. Not because he was strong in spite of loss, but because he discovered that peace was never tied to what he had. It was tied to what he could release. You sit in the clearing, not because you're tired, but because you don't need to keep moving. You remember how hard you worked to hold things together, how tightly you clung to people, plans, roles, thinking that if you could just keep everything in place, you'd be okay. But things moved anyway. People left. Chapters closed. Life, as it always does, rearranged itself without asking permission. And yet here you are, not broken, not empty, just here, and maybe, finally, at home in the space where something once was. There's a paradox flickering in this open field. You feared the loss, but it's the emptiness that lets you rest. Without the roof, you can finally breathe. Without the need to be on, you can finally soften. Without the illusion of control, you can finally feel free. You remember how much time you spent trying to recreate what was gone, trying to rebuild a feeling, a connection, a purpose. Like standing in a river and attempting to push the water back upstream. But the Stoics would ask, why fight what is natural? They believe that nature is not cruel. It simply is. And peace comes not from resisting change, but from flowing with it like a branch carried gently by the current. And tonight, you are that branch. Not broken, just released. There's a philosophical debate still echoing through time. Can comfort be found in impermanence, or is it simply the mask of detachment? You feel the edges of that question. But here, in this clearing, it's not a concept. It's a sensation. You don't feel numb. You feel whole. Not because everything worked out, but because you've stopped waiting for it to. You look up. The stars don't explain anything. They don't soothe or answer. They just shine. And you realize that's enough. You don't need the shelter anymore. You are the shelter. You've weathered storms, let go of stones, walked without a compass, faced fog, anger, disappointment, and in doing so, you've begun to discover something deeper than protection. You've discovered presence. And now, with nothing over your head but stars, you feel the most grounded you've ever been. The clearing holds you, and for the first time in a long time, you don't want to fill the silence. You just want to stay. You leave the clearing behind with a softness in your step, like walking away from an old room you no longer need to live in. The sky is still open above, but the trees begin to return, not thickly, just enough to offer contrast. Shadows beside light, form beside emptiness. And in your hand, though you don't remember picking it up, is a fragment of an old map. It's worn, smudged, unreadable in places. You pause. You've followed maps before, made them even plans. Projections. You charted routes for a life that felt certain, even if only on paper. But this one doesn't lead anywhere. And you feel it, that tight little panic just beneath the surface. That itch to know, to predict, to control. To find comfort in a line that says, go this way. You remember the version of yourself that once depended on maps, job titles, relationship milestones, savings goals, spiritual checklists. As if life could be navigated like a trail with mile markers. And then, the fire, not a literal one, but that moment everything burned. The plan you worked toward collapsed. The person you counted on walked away. The belief you held dear unraveled. The map, once crisp and complete, singed at the edges, then flared into ash. And in the space left behind, just you. You recall the Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius again, writing from the battlefield, surrounded by uncertainty and loss. He scribbled not strategies but questions to himself. What is within my power? What is not? When the map burned, he didn't chase a new one. He returned to principle. He lived in alignment, not destination. That was his compass. And now, standing here, you begin to understand why. Because the map was never wrong, but it was never meant to be the point. Maps are guesses. The world is not. You sit beside a log, its bark softened by rain, covered with moss. The map fragment lies in your hand, no longer threatening. Just paper, just ink, you don't need it now. Because something deeper than a plan is beginning to guide you. A compass of the soul. Its needle doesn't point north, it points inward. Toward values, character, clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't predict outcomes but shapes responses. The paradox here, the more certain you are of who you are, the less you need to know where you're going. You think back to the day everything fell apart. The call, the message, the realization, it felt like failure. But in that very rupture, something new began. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't dramatic. It was the space between endings and beginnings. That long, awkward breath where nothing is certain, and yet everything is possible. The Stoics would call this acceptance, not passivity but willingness. To be with what is, to align with reality instead of resisting it. You brush your fingers against the moss. Cool, damp, alive. There's a question you never thought to ask before. What if the fire wasn't destruction? What if it was clearing space for something you hadn't imagined yet? You smile. Because that's what's happened, isn't it? You didn't rebuild the map. You began to walk differently, without needing to name each step, without needing a guarantee. You think of Musonius Rufus again, teaching not theory but action. Not how to plan a perfect life, but how to live one moment by moment with presence, with discipline, with humility. You rise. Hold the map fragment in your fingers one last time. Then let it drop. It flutters gently to the forest floor, joining the mulch of old ideas, spent narratives, and stories that no longer serve you. And you walk on, not because you know what's next, but because you no longer need to. The compass hums softly inside your chest, and that is enough. A soft breeze brushes across your face as you move forward, and with it comes the faintest scent of smoke, not harsh but earthy, like a distant hearth. It stirs something in you. Memory maybe, or longing, not for a place but for a feeling, home, not the one with walls, the one inside. You slow your steps. Let your body catch up with your breath. Let your mind catch up with your body. The path narrows here, lined with stone on one side and sloping earth on the other. The way forward feels focused, almost ceremonial. And that's when you feel it, a question rising quietly like mist from the ground. What do you owe this world? It's a strange question, not moralistic, not dramatic, but honest. Because for a long time you believed you were supposed to become something specific, to fulfill a role, prove something, be useful, achieve. Give back, be better, be enough. And that word, enough, it clung to your ribs like hunger. But tonight, in this corridor of earth and stone, the hunger begins to fade. The Stoics didn't believe you owed your life to the opinions of others. They believed you owed it to reason, to virtue, to the part of yourself that remains untouched by applause or accusation. They called it your demon, your inner guide. Epictetus said your only task is to align with it, to act with integrity, no matter how others respond. Because you do not control their response, only your own direction. And here comes the paradox. The more you let go of obligation to others' expectations, the more available you become to true service. Not the kind that empties you to please, the kind that overflows because you're full. You remember a moment, maybe recent, maybe long ago, when you helped someone quietly, without credit, without recognition, just because it was right. And how peaceful that felt. Not virtuous, not self-sacrificing, just true. You walk a little further and up ahead you see an old bench, a simple wooden thing tilted slightly, blanketed with moss at the edges. You sit, and as you do, another memory returns. A time you said yes when you meant no. a time you took on more than you could handle because you didn't want to disappoint. You gave beyond your capacity, not out of love but out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being unliked, fear of seeming selfish. And the Stoics would say gently, that wasn't generosity, that was confusion. Real generosity must come from strength, not exhaustion, from clarity, not compromise. So you breathe. Let that memory pass through you without shame. You didn't know then, you're learning now. There's a tension here still debated by philosophers. Where does duty end and self-care begin? If you live only for others, you lose yourself. But if you live only for yourself, you lose connection. Perhaps, the Stoics might suggest, the answer is neither extreme. You serve best when you are centered. You give best when you're not trying to earn love. You are most helpful when you are not trying to prove you are good. And tonight, under the darkening sky, that truth settles into your bones like warmth. You do not need to be impressive. You do not need to be exceptional. You only need to be aligned. And that's what you've been practicing all along, isn't it? In the letting go, in the walking without a map, in the quiet refusal to light fires of anger. You've been practicing the kind of life that doesn't announce itself, but radiates nonetheless. You rise again, not because the bench was uncomfortable, but because stillness is only part of the journey. You walk with ease. Lighter not because your path is easier, but because you've stopped carrying what doesn't belong to you. No more borrowed duties. No more counterfeit dreams, just this, your steps, your breath, your presence. And the faint scent of smoke trailing behind you, not from destruction, but from the quiet fire of becoming. The trail softens into grass now, quiet underfoot, almost soundless. Each step is a whisper, not a statement. The trees part just enough to let moonlight spill across the path like a silver thread guiding you forward, even when you don't ask to be guided. You begin to think about endings, not just the ones you've lived through, but the one you've avoided thinking about. The end. The end of the journey, the end of breath, the end of being. You were taught not to look too closely, to turn away when the thought appeared, to distract yourself, stay busy, make plans. But the Stoics, no, they turned toward it. Memento mori, remember death, not to frighten but to focus, to remind you that what is limited becomes sacred, that this moment, right now, only matters because it will not last. You step carefully, not out of fear but reverence. There's a clearing ahead different from before. This one is quieter, still. The air here does not move. And in the center is a stone, not a marker, not a grave, just a stone. But it feels like a symbol. You sit before it. And finally, you let yourself ask, what happens when this all ends? You don't chase answers. You don't build theories. You just let the question settle into the soil. Seneca wrote often about death, not as darkness but as boundary. He said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." You remember the time you wasted, not in rest or stillness, but in resentment, in worry, in needing to be seen, the times you chose not to speak your truth, the times you made yourself small to fit someone else's frame, and yet, even those moments shaped you. The paradox returns. Even the time you think you wasted taught you how to value time. And here's the deeper truth. You fear the end not because you don't understand it, but because you haven't yet lived fully. But that's changing. Every step you've taken on this path, through fog, through fire, through silence, has brought you closer to something essential. Not immortality, but immediacy. Because once you stop denying death, you stop denying life. You look at the stone again. You imagine your name carved there, not out of morbidity but clarity. And ask yourself, if this were the end of your story, would it feel complete? And the answer comes not as a thought but as a breath. Not yet, but it's getting closer. Not because you've done everything, but because you're doing things now with your eyes open. Because you're no longer postponing meaning. You reach out, touch the stone, it's cool, solid, unmoving, but you don't feel threatened. You feel grounded. The Stoics didn't tell you not to fear death. They just asked you to fear wasting life more. To use every day like a vessel, not to fill with noise but with intention. And you've begun doing that. Slowly, quietly, even tonight. Especially tonight. There's a slight breeze now. The air shifts again, and with it comes a new thought: you will die, but you are not dying now. Right now you are alive, and that is everything. You rise, leave the stone behind, not forgotten, just acknowledged. You carry its presence with you, not as a weight but as a guide. You walk forward again, not faster, just fuller. You walk through the hush that follows that kind of reckoning, the kind where something quiet inside you has shifted, where death is no longer a threat but a teacher. And as you move forward, it feels like even the earth beneath your feet understands what you've just accepted. There's a strange clarity in knowing your time is limited. Not urgency, not anxiety, just focus. You notice details again. The way the bark peels from one tree like an old robe, how the moonlight paints the edges of rocks in silver, the sound of an owl somewhere in the distance, asking a question only the night can answer. This awareness, it's not new, but it's newly yours. You think about how often you've drifted through your days half asleep, not out of laziness but habit. Automatic motions, scrolling, scheduling, performing, repeating, until you forget to ask why. The Stoics were obsessed with the why. They asked not just how to live, but why to live at all. What exactly makes a life good? Is it virtue? Is it contribution? Is it peace? Or is it presence? You find yourself walking slower again, not because you're tired, but because you want to feel each step, each breath, as if the rhythm of your body is syncing with something larger, as if you're no longer in a hurry to get somewhere. Because for the first time, this exact moment is enough. You reach a low stone wall covered in lichen. You run your hand along it, feeling how time wears even the hardest things down into softness. And that makes you think about your armor, the invisible kind, the way you've braced yourself in life for criticism, for disappointment, for betrayal, how you hardened, how you learned to preempt pain by expecting it, by preparing for the worst, by never letting yourself feel too much joy just in case. But here's the paradox. You thought protecting yourself meant building walls, but the real safety was in letting yourself soften. You think of the philosopher Cleans, who said the mind must not be like a fortress but like a field, open to what arrives, resilient because of its flexibility. It takes more strength to remain open than to stay guarded, and more wisdom to allow pain than to fear it. You sit on the stone wall. Let your spine curve gently. Let your body rest. There's no defense here, no speech rehearsed, no argument unfolding in your head, just space. You remember a recent conversation, maybe even a fight, one where you were ready with your lines, your logic, your evidence. But halfway through, you stopped. Not because you gave up, but because you saw how unnecessary it was. You realized you weren't being attacked. You were being invited to drop the shield, to stay present, to really listen. And in that moment, something changed. Not in them, in you. That was softness. That was courage. And tonight, that memory glows inside you like a coal in your chest, quiet, warm, sustaining. The Stoics never said don't feel. They said feel wisely. You begin to rise again, not out of discipline but ease. And here's a question you carry now. What happens when you live as if nothing needs to be defended? You walk without bracing, without tightening, without needing the world to prove anything. Because when you're not on guard, you're free to meet life as it is, not as a threat but as an unfolding, a conversation, a breath, a path that doesn't need a destination to be sacred. You step forward again. And for the first time in a long time, you feel like you're not walking towards something. You're just walking with it. The trail bends softly to the right, where the trees grow taller and older. Their roots push through the earth in gentle mounds, like veins beneath skin, reminding you that everything alive is connected, even in stillness. You think of the people in your life now, and the ones who are no longer here. Some drifted, some disappeared, some you let go of on purpose. There's a heaviness in that, though not all of it is sorrow, just space. You feel the outline of their presence in your mind, how they shaped you, challenged you, reflected something back at you, even when you didn't like what you saw. And you wonder, what do we owe each other? The Stoics had strong opinions about this. They believed we are born for one another, that connection, not isolation, is the fabric of a good life. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that we are like limbs of the same body. And yet, connection is complicated. You felt the ache of being misunderstood, the sting of reaching out and receiving nothing in return, the confusion when love doesn't look like what it promises, but still you reach, you connect, you care. Because underneath the friction there's a deeper instinct. You want to belong. That's not weakness, that's being human. You walk beneath a canopy of leaves that move just enough to let moonlight flicker across your skin. The sound of your breath mingles with the wind, and you think of a time you felt deeply alone, even when others were around. Loneliness isn't about proximity, it's about resonance. And tonight, you're learning how to listen for resonance without needing to possess it, to appreciate connection when it appears, and to release it when it fades. There's a memory that rises now, maybe a friend who pulled away, or a relationship that ended not in drama but in distance. At the time it hurt, the silence, the unanswered messages, the gradual dimming. But here's the paradox. The ones who leave can still teach you how to stay, because their absence made you examine your presence. Their silence made you listen more deeply to yourself, and their departure made space for solitude that doesn't feel like loneliness but like expansion. Seneca once advised Lucilius to choose his friends carefully, not because trust is fragile but because friendship is sacred. Not everyone is meant to walk the whole journey with you, and that's not betrayal, that's life. You sit now on a fallen log, slick with dew and speckled with lichen. It doesn't groan beneath you, it simply holds your weight without complaint, and you realize that's what real connection feels like, unforced, unclutched, alive even when quiet. You think of the people still close to you, those who know the full version of you, not just the highlights, who have seen you frayed, confused, withdrawn, and still stayed. You don't need to reach out tonight, but you might, not out of obligation, out of gratitude, a text, a word, a silence shared, because what if presence doesn't mean fixing? What if it means simply witnessing? Being there for each other, not to solve but to see. To remind each other you're still here. I see you. The wind shifts again, carries a new scent, something faint and floral like memory made physical. And you rise, not to chase anyone, not to run from anything, just to walk again with gentleness, with the understanding that you're not alone, not really, even when it feels like you are. You've begun to carry connection differently now, not as something to prove, but as something to protect, quietly, honestly, with open hands. The path narrows again, but not in a confining way, more like a ribbon, gently guiding you between tall reeds and smooth stones. You run your hand along the tops of the grass. They bend and return, never snapping. There's a quiet lesson in that. You're thinking now about control, not the sharp, rigid kind, not dominance, but the subtler forms, preferences, timing, expectations, the ways you've tried to shape the world around you to match the image in your mind. And the countless moments it didn't. You laugh softly, maybe even out loud. How many hours, how many days have you spent gripping the edges of things you couldn't hold? The traffic, the delay, the silence, the outcome, and deeper still, the people who didn't behave how you hoped, the plans that unraveled, the effort that didn't yield reward. The Stoics taught that peace lies in distinguishing, knowing what is within your control and what is not. They believed that most suffering arises not from events themselves, but from our attachment to how we wish they would unfold. And tonight, under this soft veil of night, you see how true that is. You stop walking and place your hand on your chest, not dramatically, just a gesture, a check-in. What am I still trying to control? A person's opinion of you, the pace of your progress, a fear about the future. You remember a time when your desire to control was disguised as care. You meant well. You wanted things to go smoothly. You tried to help, to organize, to manage outcomes. But underneath there was fear. Fear of chaos, fear of disappointment, fear of being left behind. And that's the paradox. The tighter you try to control life, the more it resists you. But when you soften, life often cooperates in unexpected ways. You sit down beside a shallow stream now, its water gliding effortlessly over small pebbles and drifted leaves. It doesn't struggle. It doesn't grip. It simply responds to what's there, like you're learning to do. You think of Epictetus, the slave-turned-teacher, who taught his students not to curse the wind, but to adjust the sails. Not to demand a different world, but to meet the one they were given with courage and discipline. You were given this moment, not the one before, not the one you imagined, this one. And you can meet it not as a victim, not as a director, but as a participant. Even now, there's something small you can release. Maybe an argument you keep replaying. Maybe the voice that says you should be farther along by now. Maybe a fantasy about what could have been if just one thing had gone differently. You don't need to bury it, or deny it, or fight it. You just need to set it down. And as you sit beside this water, that's what you do, quietly, without ritual, you set it down. And the moment you do, your body responds. A little more breath in your lungs, a little more looseness in your spine. You realize that surrender isn't a failure of will. It's the highest expression of trust, not in fate, not in luck, but in your ability to respond wisely no matter what comes. You rise again, not lighter, clearer, because you're not carrying the illusion of control anymore, just awareness, just readiness, just the steady resolve to do your part and release the rest, like a lantern lit when the road turns dark. And tonight, that's more than enough. You walk now with a quiet strength, less like someone seeking something and more like someone who's begun to remember. Not facts, not dates, but truths. Old truths, the kind that were always there beneath the noise, waiting for you to return. And here's one of them. You've never truly been lost. You've only been unfolding. The trees thin again, and up ahead a hill rises. Not steep, just steady, a slow ascent. You begin to climb, your breath sinking with your steps. You feel your body, not as a machine, not as an object, but as a companion. It's carried you through every version of yourself. And tonight you're finally listening to it. The top of the hill isn't dramatic. There's no view, no summit. Just a small clearing with a single bench carved from old wood, worn smooth by time. You sit. And in the stillness, a question arrives. What if the freedom you've been searching for is already here? Not in the next success, not in the perfect version of yourself, but here, in this breath, this body, this moment. The Stoics spoke often of ataraxia, a state of unshakable peace. Not numbness, not detachment, just the absence of disturbance. They didn't promise joy or pleasure, they promised stability. And here's the paradox. You become free not by escaping discomfort, but by no longer fearing it. You remember a season of your life when you tried to escape everything. Pain, uncertainty, self-doubt. You chased distraction. You looked for shortcuts. You numbed even in subtle ways, overthinking, overscheduling, overgiving. But peace never came, because peace doesn't arrive when life gets easy. It arrives when you stop resisting what is. You breathe deeply now. Not as a technique, just as a reminder. You are already free, free to choose your response, free to release what isn't yours, free to forgive, yourself included. You think of that lantern again, the one from the very beginning, the one that only lit up when you were lost, and now it shines differently. Not because you're no longer lost, but because you've stopped being afraid of it. You've realized that being lost was never the enemy. It was the invitation to walk slower, to listen deeper, to become more honest. And so much of your journey wasn't about fixing, but seeing. Seeing where your expectations created suffering, seeing where your resistance kept you stuck, seeing where your habits weren't aligned with your values. And now that you've seen, you don't need to fix anything, you just need to live aware. You look up at the sky, it's a dark velvet now, pinpricked with stars. There's no message in them, no secret, just beauty, just being. You realize, maybe the point was never to master life, but to participate in it fully. And that's what you've begun to do. Like Marcus Aurelius scribbling reminders to himself on the battlefield, not to become a better emperor, but a better human. Like you walking through the terrain of your own mind, letting go of what doesn't serve, lighting a quiet path for yourself. You rise from the bench slowly, Gently, the wind brushes past you, cool and brief. You know what comes next. And you're ready because you're not chasing clarity anymore. You're walking with it, step by step. And if the lantern dims again, you'll know that's just the next invitation to return, to trust, to remember, to begin again. The trail begins to slope downward now, gently, as if easing you toward stillness. Each step feels slower but not heavy, like the exhale after a long-held breath. The trees begin to thin for the last time and the grass grows soft and low underfoot. Ahead, there's a final grove, small and quiet, cradled by earth and sky. The kind of place that feels untouched by time. The kind of place that doesn't need to be found, it simply waits until you're ready to arrive. You step into it. No words here, no questions, only presence. You sit at the center. There's no fire, no lantern, just the glow of your own attention. And it occurs to you, this is not the end of the journey. This is the part where you finally stop needing one. Because what you were searching for all along wasn't a destination, it was permission. Permission to be as you are, not as you should be, not as you were told to become. Just as you are now. You remember everything you've passed through to get here. The fog, the anger, the letting go, the loss, the silence, the breath, the release. And suddenly they all seem like necessary chapters in a single story, the one you've been writing with your choices, your thoughts, your presence. There's a soft smile on your lips, not because you've figured everything out, but because you've stopped needing to. The Stoics never promised comfort, but they promised something better, a life aligned with reality, a soul in harmony with its own nature, a freedom so quiet it doesn't need to shout. And here, under this dark sky, with the ground steady beneath you, you feel that freedom settle inside you like still water. You recall the moments you doubted yourself, the spirals, the overthinking, the shame, the fear of being behind, of being too late. But here's the paradox, you were never behind, you were always becoming. You think of the lantern again, lit not when you were strong but when you were lost. And now you carry that light inside you. It no longer flares only in desperation. It glows with steadiness. It is the clarity of accepting what is, of choosing what matters, of being fully here. No map, no shield, no performance, just you awake, whole even in your uncertainties, free even in your limits. And now, as the night deepens, your breath begins to slow. The world grows quieter still. It's time to let the mind soften, time to let the body rest, time to step fully into the moment that asks nothing of you except this: be still, be present, be home. Let the noise of thought drift like clouds. Let the warmth of peace gather around you like a blanket. Let everything fade into the hush of this moment. You've walked a long way to return to yourself. And now there's nowhere else to be, only here, only now, only sleep. You lie back now, whether in your bed or in your thoughts, with the stillness you've earned. There's no need to hold anything, no more striving, no more arriving, just the softness of this moment folding over you like dusk. The breath rises. The breath falls. There is no rush. Nothing waits for you but the next gentle breath, the slow wave of rest. You've remembered so much on this journey, not just ideas, but truths you'd buried under the noise of life. That you don't need to be perfect to be present. That you don't need answers to feel peace. That your worth was never a question to begin with. Let those truths settle now, not as thoughts, but as warmth in your chest, a loosening in your shoulders, a stillness in your jaw. Everything is okay, even the things that aren't, even the things still becoming. You're safe, you're seen. And in this space between night and dawn, between knowing and not knowing, you are most yourself. Let the world be what it is. Let your dreams drift in slowly like fog over a still lake. No need to direct them. No need to follow, just rest. You've already lit the lantern, you don't need to carry it anymore. It stays with you, even here, especially here. Sleep well, you've made it home.